Hello and welcome. Today we'll be looking at the editor of Tome of Fate. We'll be creating a new story and renaming it. Next, selecting it to enter the story editor. As you can see, it is a large zone where you can create your story. Zoom in and zoom out as you please. You can also change the background that you will be using. First thing we'll want to do is create interest points for our story. Using the buttons, you can create and delete interest points. You can also select them and use the delete key to remove them. Entering an interest point, you can change its name. This is only for the editor. For example, this one I will call 1 the start. Here is the content that will be shown to the player. And the response, it will be the possibility shown to the player. As you can see at the moment there's no link, so the story will end. But you can link it with one of the other interest points. For example, interest point number 2. You can have as many options as you want. And for example, this one we could pick another interest point. If there's at any time an option that you don't want to have, you can delete it. You can also move them. So option number 2 will be shown first now, and option number 1 after. As you can see, there are no linked between them. Again, this is only for the editor and it's not shown to the player, while the text is shown to the player. And you can decide again any kind of link between the story. Here you can see now there's a path between 1 and 2 and then interest 5. You can also create a link backward if this is something you like to do. But this will create a possible infinite loop. Under details, you'll see the name of the story and the starting points that you can pick. You can pick any of the interest point as a start. Right now we want number 1 to be the start. Heroes. You can create heroes as many as you want. As you can see, I've just created Razar, and here will be the description shown to the player. You can edit his stats, this will be the core stats that the hero will have. And you can as well add an image to the character. Under resource, you can create any slots that will be used with the character. So for example, you can add a weapon slot and call it in weapon. You can add second weapon slot. Name secondary weapon. Under resource, you'll be able to create object and define which slots it could be using. For example, I'll create a sword, and it could go under the main weapon, or it could go under secondary weapon. So now, when the sword is being used, it can be equipped in one of the two slots. If, for example, I want to create a fist weapon and only have it as a secondary weapon, you can just only add secondary weapon. All the bonuses here is just the bonuses that the weapon will provide to the hero. Max is the number of stack that the hero can carry at once. So for example, the sword will be 1 per stack. And here you can enter a description of the weapon. Like I mentioned, you can add multiple different type, like defense, additional, usable object, story object, inventory space, and attributes. They all act in different ways. Weapon is used for damage, defense is used for defense, additional will add additional bonuses to the character. Usable object will be any of the object that could be used, for example potions or food. Story object of object for the story and is not shown as a regular object to the player. Inventory space is used for any kind of inventory. So for example, if you want the character to have 2 inventory slots, you could just do inventory 1, inventory 2, and now the character will have 2 inventory backspace. The last one is the attribute system. This is to be able to add different attributes like morality, for example. This will show in a separate tab as not an regular inventory items, but as an attribute itself. Monsters. You can add as many monsters as you want. It's fairly straightforward. You can create, for example, an imp. You can add its stats. For example, we could create as well a succubus, and we can add its stats as well. And now you do have 2 monsters that you could interact with into the point of interest. For example, if you want interest number 5 to be a combat, let's create 3 combat. can go under the combat tab and add any of the template. For example, we want to fight an imp and then a succubus. So the character, the hero, once he reach interest number 5, will have to fight an imp and then a succubus. If you want, for example, to be receiving a sword once you defeat the opponent, just add one sword or many swords once the combat is over. The requisite is the object that you will need to get into that interest point. For example, you will need exactly one sword to enter the interest point, or at least one sword. Here, in case you want to have the object being consumed, we want, for example, to have exactly one sword and do not consume the object. The object will not be destroyed. You'll need to be exactly one sword to be entering this interest point. Under purchases, you can purchase different items. So for example, for one fist weapon, you can purchase one sword. With one fist weapon, you'll be able to purchase one sword. This is very useful when you want to have trade in your story. The last tab here is for the hero. This can be selected if, for example, the hero can only access a point once. For example, this one, we want to have only once the possibility to enter that point. So this will grant some stats at the end of the combat. For example, he might regain 5 life and 3 luck. In the constant stat modification, maybe you want to provide some gain in terms of the skill. For example, he defeated 2 monsters, he's gonna gain 1 skill. So this is a constant. This is temporary stats. This will be the constant stat. So for example, again, 1 skill points and 1 luck. Right below here, you can import an image where the hero will have a new image. That is interesting if you want the hero to evolve throughout the story and show different images of him evolving. If this is empty, it will just remain the same as the base image for the hero. Here there is a little X if requires luck. This can also be used if you want a node to require luck to enter. For example, you could have 3 options, and one of them, to access it, you need to have at least 1 luck. This will consume the 1 luck. Over here to the right side, you can have different color and different images. For example, this one we might want it to be a little sword clashing, and we want it to be red. And now, as I confirm it, it is now red, same as the image we've had. This is only for the editor. The way to change the gameplay image is through that side, gameplay, where you can have your image library and select the one you want. You can add it, select it, delete it. There's a few more elements here with edit language, where you can add different languages. For example, I could add French, which is my mother tongue, and now I can use both English and French. Now if I go under Heroes, as you can see, Razar has a description in English. Now if I use the F keys to get into French, you can see that his name and the description disappear because this is localized. Maybe I want his name to not be Razar in French, but maybe Jacques. And I want his description to be in French. And as simple as that, you can switch between your different languages and develop different languages for your story. And again, F1 key, F2 keys. Once you are happy with the story you've created, you can go ahead and save it. So it's good to save, and as well export your story. You can select the title that you want to export. Have a description, a quick description of your story that will be shown when someone create a new story. Alright, you can also select an image, and then you can decide whether you want to export it locally or on the Steam Workshop. And for example, I will export it locally. And as you can see as well, if you have any question, you can toggle the help. It has a few ideas of what each elements are about. That is it for today. Thank you.